What are the 4 dimensions of emotional intelligence? Because if you know each one, you can focus and build your emotional intelligence. And what we know is that the wider the emotional intelligence, the deeper your emotional intelligence, the better leader you'll become. During the emotional intelligence training that I offer, one of the questions that I ask is, who is the most memorable leader you've ever worked for? And over the years, I've had many different answers. But if I review them, these are the most common. Calm under pressure. They were able to improve my style. They were able to coach me and to mentor me. They were able to listen. They were able to listen without judgment. They were optimistic. They had a can-do attitude. And what have all these got in common? They're all elements of emotional intelligence. And so therefore, if we know the 4 dimensions, if we know what they are, we can work on them, and we too can become the memorable leader we're trying to be. So in this video, we're going to go through each of those elements and point them out and how we might increase them. And at the end, I'm going to show you an example of a leader who has integrated all 4 because she's a memorable leader. The first dimension is self-awareness. How are you feeling today? How many times have we asked that question? And I know the person just wants a simple answer, I'm fine. But really, if you want to get to the heart of self-awareness, that's a really important question. How do you feel? How are you able to distinguish one emotion from the other? Are you able to say, in this moment, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling sad? What emotion is it? And it's not only the emotion, but it's also the intensity of the emotion. So, am I angry, or am I just miffed? Am I angry, or am I furious, or am I explosive? People with really good self-awareness are able to distinguish one emotion from the other, and they're able to distinguish as well the intensity. The other element of self-awareness that's really important is our ability to be in touch with our physiological signs in our body. You know, we live in a world of work where very often what's required is from the neck upwards. And we leave out the whole intelligence that our body has. You know, our body tells us when we are in an emotion way before we become conscious of that emotion. So if we learn to tell the signs of our body, we can add choice. And choice is magic when it comes to emotional intelligence. So am I feeling tension? Am I feeling my heart beating? Am I feeling breathing deeper or lighter? Am I feeling hot or cold? All of those are signs perhaps that the body has been triggered. And talking about triggers, that's the third element of self-awareness. Do you know your emotional triggers? Because every day at work, we have opportunities to test our knowledge. We are triggered now more than ever. And knowledge of those triggers, how we're triggered, why we're triggered, once again, gives us incredible knowledge that we can add choice into how we respond. The second dimension is self-management. Now, it's one thing to know all the things of self-awareness, to know what emotions we have, to know the strength of those emotions, their intensity, to know the signs in our body. But we also have to have a toolkit to use so that we can manage those emotions as well. You know, a few years ago, I was in Hawaii. And if you've ever been there, you'll know that some of the beaches are rather obscure. And the only way you get to them is by reading the mile marker. And it might be an entrance 200 yards behind a mile marker. Well, we tried to get to this beach and we got hopelessly lost. And so we turned down to this little house to ask for information about where we were. And there was a gentleman there who was carving a wood bowl. And he said, you know, if I had $1 for every person that asked me that they got lost, I'd be a rich man. But I got fascinated at this bowl that he was carving. And as I looked, I spent 2 or 3 hours with him. And he had this huge chest of different instruments. And he would pull one out and he would carve a certain way. And I asked him, how do you know which instrument to use? And he said, well, it depends on the wood. It depends on the thickness of the wood. It depends what we need at the moment. In many ways, self-management is like that. We amass a set of tools that we use in the moment. What do we do when we're triggered for anger? What do we do when we're triggered for sadness? How do we respond to an angry boss? How do we respond to a team that's just got no motivation? People who are emotionally intelligent are able to pull out a tool from their self-management kit and to operate it and to use it so that they're better able to manage in the moment. The third dimension is social awareness. Now, social awareness, unlike self-awareness, is awareness that's pointed outwards. It's the ability to recognize what's happening with the people around me. And so therefore, we're able to look at people's faces and to see what's happening, to be able to detect emotions. Because one of the wonderful things we're able to do with the research on universal emotions is to detect people's 7 universal emotions, whether they are sad or happy, whether they're surprised, whether they're angry, whether they're contemptuous, or whether they have disgust or fear. And we're able to read that in people's faces, and that gives us knowledge to become aware in the moment of what's going on in the situation. We're also able to read perhaps some of their body language. Have things changed since the beginning of a conversation? Are we able to pick up nuances in the voice, perhaps in the words that they're using? Perhaps it's a change in their vocal tone. All of these provide us with data that can help us be aware in the moment. And emotional intelligence helps us in picking up these signs. The fourth and final dimension is relationship management. So we're building this up in a set of blocks. We've become aware of ourselves. We're able to manage some of the emotions that we're feeling. We've now been able to look at what's happening in front of us with others and social awareness. And now this last dimension, it's all about relationship management. How do I manage the relationships around me? And this skill set really brings everything together. It's the ability, for example, to deal with conflict in the moment. You know, whenever you bring 2 people together, inevitably at some time there is going to be conflict. And conflict brings up so many different emotions. So are you able to react and to respond to the conflict in the moment? People that have really good relationship management skills, I find, also are curious. They're curious about the other person. They ask lots of really good questions, because at the core of good leadership is the ability to be curious and ask questions. Because through asking questions, we find out a lot more about the other person, and we learn some other ways that we might want to respond as well. Relationship management is becoming aware in the decisions that we are making, and who's making the decisions, and how we're making those decisions. Relationship management is all about how we are able to build up bonds of trust and connection with other people. So there we have it. We have self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So let's put it all together. Let me give you an example. I work with a client of mine, let's call her Sheila, a few years ago. And one of the things that Sheila wanted to do was to really work on each of those 4 elements. And we took a few months and we looked at becoming more self-aware, of managing some of those emotions, becoming more aware of others, reading others' emotions, and then finally bringing that together in managing relationships. And I remember one session that we had, she came in with a huge smile on her face and she said, "I think I nailed it." I said, "Tell me more." She talked about a project that had to be delivered with a really tight time crunch. And everyone was feeling the stress of the time limit. She had a meeting one afternoon and knew that it would be a particularly tense meeting because the deadline was looming. Before she left for the meeting, she took some time to check in with herself. She became more self-aware. She noticed that she was carrying a lot of tension, that she herself was under a lot of anxiety, and the last thing that she wanted to do was to say something that she regretted, but also to feed the other team with some of her emotional attention. And so she went to one of her practices, self-management, and she started breathing deeply a few times. And then she started to visualize what the meeting would look like. She visualized it being successful. She visualized her being able to calm people in the midst of their anxiety. She was able to deal with whatever pressures with a lot of grace. And with that, she stepped away and went into the meeting. The minute she went into the meeting, she could feel the tension in the air. Social awareness. And so she sat down, she recognized what was happening, and she said, look, I know everyone is under a lot of tension, but I'm sure as a team, we can really pull through. And one by one, each person reported, and then it came to Tom. Now, Tom had a history with Sheila of really not delivering when it countered, and lo and behold, today was no different. And Tom said, you know, I've had so many things and I really haven't quite finished what I meant to. And Sheila could feel within her this tension rising. She had been triggered because Tom was one of her triggers. And yet Sheila knew that Tom was one of her triggers, self-awareness. And so she herself had something to turn to, a tool in the moment when she had been triggered, self-management. So instead of saying something she regretted to Tom, she stopped, she took a breath, and she turned to another tool, questions, relationship management. And so she turned to Tom and she said, Tom, tell me, is there anything we all need to know about your part of the project? And Tom talked about something that had suddenly come up, and the whole team had not been aware of this. And because of Sheila's ability to ask a question in the moment rather than critique Tom, the team became aware of something else that they needed to deal with before the final delivery. The meeting ended, and 3 days later, the project came in on time. Now that's emotional intelligence. Do you go to the gym every day? And if you do, I'm sure you know that keeping healthy is important. But have you gone to the emotional gym today? Have you tried to expand your emotional intelligence? Today we've gone through 4 building blocks. So I invite you to turn to the first building block, self-awareness, because in many ways, it's the foundation of others. And if you want to learn more about self-awareness, why not tune into what is self-awareness and why it's important? Because with that foundation, you've already started growing your emotional intelligence.